The man who built the world died 3 years too early, and nobody noticed until the city started screaming. Marcus Webb had been staring at the same holographic blueprint for 6 hours straight, his cheap Kiroshi optics burning with digital fatigue, when the first structural alert pinged through the construction network. Then another. Then 17 more in the span of 30 seconds, each one a red flag screaming that something fundamental had gone catastrophically wrong. He stood on the observation deck of the Arasaka Tower construction site, 40 stories above Night City's corporate district, watching the skeleton of what should have been humanity's future begin to sing. Not metaphorically. The steel was actually singing. A high-pitched metallic shriek that started somewhere in the superstructure's core and spread outward through every support beam, every tension cable, every chrome-reinforced joint that was supposed to hold 63 floors of corporate dreams suspended against gravity. The sound built like a scream trapped in metal throat. Workers on the exposed floors looked up from their welding rigs and nano-cement mixers, confusion flickering across faces that hadn't yet registered the danger. Marcus's neural link to the structural monitoring system was feeding him data faster than his brain could process it. Stress fractures propagating through load-bearing columns. Tension cables snapping in sequence. The entire eastern support matrix beginning to buckle under weight it should have been able to hold. Should have. According to every conventional engineering principle, according to every safety calculation Marcus had run and rerun obsessively for the past 8 months, the structure should have held. But Dr. Adrian Cross hadn't believed in conventional engineering, and now Cross was 3 years dead. His genius scattered across a Japantown alley along with his brains, and Marcus was standing here watching 217 workers realize they were about to fall. The tower folded in on itself with a terrible grace, steel beams bending like chrome flowers, wilting in fast forward. Marcus's optics automatically zoomed in, tracking the cascade failure with digital precision he desperately wished he didn't have. He could see individual faces. A woman with pink synthetic hair and Dynalar eye replacements, her mouth open in a scream his ears couldn't hear yet over the shrieking metal. A man with military-grade dermal armor trying to run toward a support cable, his enhanced reflexes not quite fast enough. A young rigger still jacked into his construction mech. Probably didn't even know anything was wrong until his machine started falling with him, still inside it. The collapse lasted 43 seconds. Marcus's optics recorded every frame, storing the nightmare in his neural buffer where it would loop forever during his 4-hour sleep cycles. When the dust began to settle, when the screaming metal finally went silent and left only the screaming people, Marcus became aware of someone standing behind him. He'd known Takeshi Hayama was there for the last 20 seconds. His peripheral cybernetics had flagged the heat signature and threat assessment automatically, but acknowledging the Arasaka Overseer's presence meant acknowledging what had just happened. What Marcus had just allowed to happen. "You have 30 seconds to explain," Hayama said, his voice carrying that peculiar flatness of someone who'd replaced their vocal cords with Arasaka's premium synthetic package. "Why I shouldn't have you thrown from this deck to join them." Marcus didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on the rubble below, where Trauma Team AVs were already descending like chrome vultures. Platinum coverage would get you extracted within 2 minutes. Gold within 5. Silver within 10. Bronze, if you were lucky and not too far from a major corporate zone, might show up within 20. Everyone else became organic debris for the cleanup crews. "The load calculations were perfect," he said quietly. His throat felt raw, though he hadn't been screaming. "I checked them 473 times. The materials met spec. The construction sequence followed Cross's methodology exactly. Every safety protocol was... Cross is dead." Hayama's chrome hand landed on Marcus's shoulder, fingers cold even through his jacket. "Has been for 3 years. You are the lead structural engineer on this project. You certified these designs. You signed off on every phase of construction. So I will ask again, with less patience. What happened?" Marcus finally turned. Hayama's face was a study in corporate augmentation aesthetics. One side still organic, weathered and scarred. The other side replaced with Arasaka's finest chrome plating and a red cybernetic eye that never stopped recording. The contrast was deliberate. A reminder that Hayama straddled both worlds, flesh and metal, and had mastered both. Adrian Cross was a genius, Marcus said. The kind of genius that comes along maybe once in a generation. He didn't just design buildings, he understood something fundamental about how structures exist in space, how materials interact with gravity and stress in ways that conventional physics says shouldn't work. His megacity designs were supposed to revolutionize urban architecture. Self-contained vertical ecosystems, cities that grew upward instead of sprawling outward like a cancer. I'm aware of Cross's CV. What I'm not aware of is why his designs keep failing. That was the question that had been eating Marcus alive for 8 months, ever since Arasaka had pulled him from a mid-level engineering position and dropped him into Cross's old office with a stack of blueprints and the impossible task of finishing a dead man's vision. This is the third major structural failure this month, Marcus said, pulling up the data in his HUD and flicking it toward Hayama's optics. The files materialized in the air between them. Holographic nightmares rendered in red warning text. Militech's Arcology in Seoul developed fractures on floor 90. 15 dead, 63 injured. Petrochem's residential complex in Bangkok showed catastrophic metal fatigue after only 6 months of operation. 37 dead. And now this. I know the body count, Webb. Tell me why. Worry. Marcus gestured toward the holographic blueprints, still rotating slowly in his vision. Those beautiful, impossible designs that Cross had created. Every structural engineer I've consulted says the same thing. The mathematics in Cross's designs are wrong. The materials couldn't possibly support the weight at those angles. The tension to stress ratios violate fundamental principles of physics. And yet the 5 megastructures Cross personally oversaw are still standing. Yes. Vosteli. That was the nightmare that kept Marcus awake during his increasingly rare sleep cycles, jacked into stimulants just to keep his synapses firing. The Arasaka North American headquarters, the Militech Command Tower in Washington, the Biotechnica Research Arcology in Mexico City, the Petrochem Refinery Complex in Texas, the Savoil Administrative Megastructure in Moscow, all of them designed by Cross, all of them violating conventional engineering principles, all of them standing perfectly stable. He pulled up another set of files, these ones marked with the red classifications that meant they technically shouldn't exist. I've analyzed every structural element of those buildings, scanned them with equipment that costs more than most people's houses. The materials are standard. The construction methods are documented. But there's something in how they're assembled, some underlying principle that Cross never wrote down. It was all in his head. Hayama's cybernetic eye refocused, probably running probability assessments through whatever combat software Arasaka had loaded into his skull. Then we find someone who worked closely with Cross, someone who understood his methodology. I did. Marcus had spent the first 3 months doing nothing but tracking down every engineer, architect, construction worker, and janitor who'd ever worked with Adrian Cross. He didn't collaborate, didn't share his process, showed up at construction sites with completed designs and supervised every phase of assembly personally. Anyone who questioned his methods got fired. Anyone who tried to reverse engineer his mathematics found themselves facing corporate espionage charges. Below them, the sirens had multiplied into a chorus. Marcus could see body bags being loaded into automated transport vehicles. The news drones would already be uploading footage to every network in Night City, running it with headlines about corporate negligence and dangerous construction practices. Arasaka's stock would take a hit. Militech would capitalize on the bad press. The never-ending corporate warfare would escalate another degree, because in 2017, the megacore were already circling each other like chrome sharks. The corporate wars are coming, Hayama said, echoing Marcus's thoughts in that uncanny way that made him wonder if the Overseer had some kind of predictive software running. Within 3 years, maybe less, Militech and Arasaka will move from economic warfare to actual warfare. When that happens, these megacities were supposed to be our fortresses, self-sufficient ecosystems that could withstand sieges, supply disruptions, orbital strikes. Instead, they're death traps that collapse under their own weight. Marcus pulled up a map of Night City, overlaying it with construction projects in progress. There were 17 megastructure projects currently underway within city limits alone. Multiply that by every major urban center on the planet, and you had trillions of eurodollars being poured into architecture that nobody understood how to build anymore. Every major corporation is racing to complete construction before open warfare makes it impossible, Hayama continued. We're building the future while the present burns down around us. And you're the one holding the dead man's blueprints. The weight of that statement settled over Marcus like a physical thing. He accessed his personnel file, pulling up his own credentials. Doctorate in structural engineering from Caltech. 15 years of experience with conventional high-rise construction. 3 patents on stress distribution algorithms. All of it worthless when faced with Cross's impossible genius. I need access to Cross's personal effects, Marcus said. His home workshop, his private servers, his data shards, anything he left behind that might explain his process. Hayama's laugh was synthetic and humorless. Those were seized by Militech approximately 47 hours after his death. Corporate espionage laws. Anything potentially valuable in understanding his methodology is locked behind Militech's black ice and guarded by netrunners who would fry your brain if you even tried to access it. Of course, in 2017, the corporations were already treating innovation like a zero-sum game. If Arasaka couldn't have Cross's secrets, they'd make damn sure Militech couldn't use them either. And vice versa. The result was that humanity's best hope for sustainable urban development had died in a Japantown alley for 14 eddies, and his legacy was locked away behind corporate firewalls. Unless the secret wasn't in the data. Marcus had been thinking about this for weeks, turning it over in his mind during those stimulant-fueled nights when sleep wouldn't come. Cross had been famous for his eccentricities. He'd insisted on living in the districts he designed, claimed he needed to feel the flow of the space. He'd walked construction sites at odd hours, sometimes in the middle of the night, just standing in partially completed structures and staring at the steel bones like he was reading something written in the metal itself. I need to see where he died, Marcus said. The silence that followed was heavy enough that Marcus could feel it pressing against his eardrums. Hayama's organic eye and cybernetic eye both focused on him with an intensity that suggested threat assessment algorithms were running at full capacity. The crime scene from 3 years ago, Hayama said slowly. You want to visit the alley where a random ganger put 2 rounds through Cross's skull while robbing him for pocket change. Explain your reasoning. Marcus pulled up the incident report, one of the few documents that hadn't been completely buried under corporate classification. Dr. Adrian Cross, age 38, found deceased in Japantown's Eastern District at approximately 22:47 on March 15, 2017. Cause of death: 2 gunshot wounds to the head from a modified Lexington pistol. Suspected perpetrator: unknown ganger, possibly affiliated with the Tiger Claws based on territorial patterns. Motive: robbery. Amount stolen: €14 and a cred chip with 73 eddies. The most brilliant architectural mind of the century, murdered for less than 100 eddies. It was the kind of random violence that Night City specialized in. The sort of meaningless death that happened 100 times a day in the combat zones. Except Marcus didn't believe in meaningless deaths anymore. Not when Cross's final project, the design for the Arasaka Tower they'd just watched collapse, had been in his pocket when he died. Cross didn't just design buildings, Marcus said. He lived architecture, breathed it. Every structure he created was an extension of his own neural patterns, his own understanding of how space and materials interact. If there's anything left of his methodology, any trace of his process, it won't be in corporate databases or academic papers. It'll be in the spaces he inhabited, the places he moved through, the geometry he existed within. It sounded insane even as he said it. But then, everything about Cross had been insane. The man had designed buildings that shouldn't be able to stand, using mathematics that violated established principles, achieving results that no one else could replicate. If you were going to understand that kind of genius, you had to be willing to follow it into places where rational analysis broke down. Hayama was quiet for a long moment, his cybernetic eye whirring as it refocused. Below them, the cleanup crews had arrived with their heavy equipment, beginning the grim process of sifting through rubble for bodies and black boxes and anything else that might be salvageable. 48 hours, Hayama finally said. You have 48 hours to find something useful in Cross's death site, his old haunts. wherever this insane theory takes you. If you can unlock his methodology, Arasaka will have a competitive advantage worth more than this disaster will cost us. If you can't, he gestured toward the wreckage below. We pivot to conventional architecture. Lose the edge, but at least our buildings won't kill our own people. And the workers who just died will be compensated according to their contracts. Their families will receive the standard death benefits. Arasaka takes care of its own web. But if you actually care about preventing more deaths, I suggest you start caring less about the ones already gone, and more about the thousands who will die in future collapses if we don't figure this out. It was cold calculus, the kind of math that mega corporations excelled at. Marcus had never been comfortable with it, which was probably why he'd never risen higher in Arasaka's hierarchy. He still thought of workers as people rather than assets, casualties as tragedies rather than acceptable losses. Maybe that made him weak in Hayama's eyes. Or maybe it made him exactly desperate enough to chase a dead man's ghost through Japantown's alleys. I'll need access to Cross's movement logs, Marcus said. Everywhere he went in the 6 months before his death. Security footage, transit records, credit transactions, anything that might show his patterns. Already being compiled and sent to your neural storage. Hayama's chrome fingers released their grip on Marcus's shoulder. The AV is waiting on the landing pad. Your trauma team coverage has been upgraded to gold for the duration of this investigation. Try not to need it. Marcus waited until Hayama's footsteps faded before allowing himself to look at the collapse site one more time. The dust had settled enough that he could see the twisted skeleton of what should have been a marvel of engineering. Somewhere in that wreckage were answers, or at least questions worth asking. His optics pinged with incoming data. Cross's final 6 months of movement, compressed into a file that would take hours to properly analyze. He flagged it for processing and started toward the landing pad, where an Arasaka AV was already warming its turbines. Japantown was 43 blocks south, in a district that had gotten considerably worse since 2017. Gang activity had tripled. Cyberpsychosis incidents were breaking records monthly. The streets were a proving ground for the chrome and blood future that was coming for everyone, whether they were ready or not. Marcus's upgraded trauma team coverage meant he'd probably survive if things went wrong. Probably. Gold level got you extracted within 5 minutes anywhere in the corporate zones, but Japantown was borderline combat zone territory these days. 5 minutes could be a lifetime when chromed-up gangers decided you looked like easy prey. The AV lifted off smoothly, its AI pilot already calculating the optimal route through Night City's aerial traffic patterns. Marcus strapped in and started reviewing the data flooding his neural buffer. Cross's final months painted a picture of a man obsessed, moving through the city in patterns that didn't quite make sense. He'd visited construction sites at odd hours, spent time in districts that had nothing to do with his current projects, made purchases that seemed random, vintage architectural texts, black market cyberware, synthetic compounds that might have been recreational drugs or might have been something else entirely. And in his final week, Cross had visited the same Japantown alley 3 times, the alley where he would eventually die. That couldn't be coincidence. Marcus didn't believe in coincidence anymore. Not in a world where corporations murdered each other over market share and brilliant architects died for pocket change. The AV descended through layers of neon and smog, dropping toward Japantown's eastern district, where the streets were narrower and the lights were redder and the chrome was cheaper. Marcus could see the district's heart through the canopy. Pachinko parlors and synthetic meat vendors and ripperdoc clinics advertising discount cyberware installations. The legitimate businesses pressed up against the illegal ones with no clear boundary between them. The pilot announced their arrival with a synthetic chime. Marcus checked his weapon, a Militech Arms Avenger pistol that he barely knew how to use, and stepped out into the neon-stained darkness of a district where answers might be waiting, or where he might just become another statistic in Night City's endless body count. Either way, the clock was running. 48 hours to unlock a dead genius's secrets or watch the future collapse one building at a time. The alley smelled like synthetic piss and ozone, a combination that Marcus's olfactory filters couldn't quite scrub out. His optics adjusted to the darkness automatically, highlighting the layers of grime and graffiti that covered every surface. Tiger claw tags glowed faintly under UV light, territorial markers that warned outsiders they were being watched. Marcus stood where Cross had died, according to the crime scene coordinates still archived in NCPD's database. The exact spot was unmarked now, 3 years of foot traffic and rain having washed away any trace of blood or police tape. Just another patch of cracked concrete in an alley that had probably seen a dozen murders since. He pulled up the incident reconstruction in his HUD, letting the AR overlay paint the scene in ghostly wireframes. Cross had been walking west, heading toward the main street. The shooter had come from behind, from deeper in the alley. 2 shots, both to the head. Professional execution disguised as a robbery, or actual robbery by someone who got lucky with their aim. The NCPD report had never determined which. But what had Cross been doing here in the first place? This alley didn't connect to anything significant. No shortcuts to major transit lines. No notable businesses or residences. Just a dead-end passage between 2 aging apartment blocks. The kind of space that existed in the cracks of the city's geometry. Marcus walked the length of the alley slowly, his optics scanning for anything unusual. Structural elements. Architectural features. Anything that might have drawn Cross's attention. The walls were standard prefab construction. Nothing special. The ground was reinforced concrete, cracked but stable. Above, a tangle of power cables and data lines created a chaotic web against the night sky. Nothing. Just an ordinary alley in an ordinary district where an extraordinary man had died for no apparent reason. Marcus accessed Cross's movement logs again, overlaying them on his current position. The data painted a route through Japantown that looped and doubled back on itself, hitting the same locations repeatedly. This alley, a ramen stand 3 blocks north, a small temple tucked between 2 corporate buildings, an observation deck on a mid-rise apartment complex, and then back to the alley. The pattern repeated 7 times in Cross's final week. Always the same route, always ending here. You were looking at something, Marcus muttered to the empty air. Something about the geometry, the flow of space. What were you seeing that nobody else could? His optics pinged with an incoming call. Hayama's chrome face materialized in his vision, expression unreadable. "Status report," the overseer said without preamble. "I'm at the death site. Nothing obvious yet. Cross visited this location repeatedly before he died, but I can't determine why." "Then you're wasting time. 46 hours remaining, Webb. I suggest you develop a theory quickly or start preparing your resignation." The call disconnected before Marcus could respond. Professional courtesy wasn't Hayama's strong suit, but then, nobody climbed to senior overseer at Arasaka by being polite. Marcus sat down on the filthy concrete, ignoring the protests from his body about the questionable hygiene. He needed to think like Cross. Not as an engineer following blueprints, but as whatever kind of genius could see architecture as a living language. He pulled up every file he had on Cross's design philosophy. Fragmentary notes and interviews that had been preserved before Militech's data seizure. One quote kept recurring, from a lecture Cross had given at MIT 3 years before his death. "Buildings don't exist in isolation. They're nodes in a network of space and energy. You can't design a structure without understanding its relationship to everything around it. The streets, the other buildings, the flow of human movement, even the electromagnetic fields generated by the city's infrastructure. Architecture is about reading the existing pattern and adding to it in ways that enhance rather than disrupt." Marcus looked up at the tangle of power cables above him. Electromagnetic fields, the city's infrastructure. His optics had basic EM scanning capability, nothing sophisticated but enough to detect major power sources. He activated it, watching his vision shift into a spectrum of colors representing different electromagnetic frequencies. The alley lit up like a neural pathway. Power cables formed a dense network overhead, but they weren't chaotic. The seemingly random tangle actually created a geometric pattern, overlapping hexagons that distributed current in a specific configuration. And the walls, which he dismissed as ordinary prefab construction, were lined with metal framing that acted as passive conductors, creating resonance patterns in the electromagnetic field. The alley wasn't just an alley. It was a node, a focal point where multiple layers of the city's infrastructure intersected in ways that created a stable field pattern. Marcus stood up, his heart rate accelerating. He pulled up Cross's other frequent locations and overlaid them on a city map. the ramen stand, the temple, the observation deck. When he activated EM scanning and checked their coordinates against the city's infrastructure database, the pattern became clear. They were all nodes. All points where electromagnetic fields, structural load paths, and human traffic patterns intersected in stable configurations. And they formed a geometric relationship with each other. A network of connections that spanned 3 city blocks in a pattern that looked almost organic. Cross hadn't been wandering randomly. He'd been mapping something, reading the city's invisible architecture, the layer of energy and flow that existed beneath the visible structures. And his megacity designs, those impossible buildings that violated conventional physics, they weren't violating physics at all. They were working with it in ways that required understanding these deeper patterns. Marcus pulled up the blueprints for Arasaka Tower, the structure that had just collapsed. He overlaid them on the city's EM field map, checking the location against the same metrics Cross had been tracking. The tower had been built in the wrong place. Not wrong by conventional standards. The location had been chosen for maximum visibility and strategic positioning. But wrong according to the invisible architecture Cross had been mapping. The tower sat at a point where multiple conflicting EM fields intersected, where the flow of structural stress through the surrounding buildings created interference patterns, where the geometry of the space itself fought against the structure's design. Christ, Marcus whispered. You weren't just designing buildings, you were designing around the city's nervous system. His optics pinged with another alert, this one from his AV's security system. Someone was approaching his position from the north end of the alley. Multiple someones, their heat signatures showing heavy chrome modifications. Marcus's hand went to his Avenger pistol automatically, though he had no illusions about his chances in a fight against chromed-up gangers. His trauma team coverage was good, but only if he survived long enough for them to reach him. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, their bodies heavily modified with visible cyberware. Mantis blades folded against forearms, dermal plating that caught the neon light in rainbow sheens, optics that glowed with predatory red luminescence. The leader, a woman with a chrome skull replacing most of her head, stopped 3 meters away. Close enough to be threatening, far enough to give her reaction time if Marcus tried anything stupid. You're the Arasaka engineer, she said. Not a question. Her voice was heavily synthesized, probably running through multiple vocal processors. The one trying to finish Cross's work. Marcus kept his hand near his weapon, but didn't draw. Who's asking? Someone who worked with Cross, before the corporations killed him. That made Marcus pause. The official story was random violence, a robbery gone wrong. But he'd suspected for months that there was more to it. The NCPD report said, the NCPD report was written by corpo rats who didn't want to admit one of their prize assets got executed. The woman moved closer. Her movements too smooth, too precise. Military-grade reflex boosters, probably. Cross was murdered because he figured out something the megacorps didn't want public. And you're about to stumble into the same mess if you keep digging. What did he figure out? That megacity architecture isn't sustainable. Not the way the corpos are building it. She gestured toward the walls of the alley, the pattern of EM fields that Marcus had just discovered. Cross understood that cities have natural energy flows. Build with them, and your structures last forever. Build against them, and they collapse. Slowly at first, then catastrophically. The megacorps are building against the flow because they don't understand it. And when Cross tried to tell them, they decided his secrets were more valuable than his life. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Which corporation killed him? Does it matter? Arasaka, Militech, Petrochem? They're all playing the same game. Cross had knowledge that could revolutionize urban development, which meant whoever controlled that knowledge controlled the future of every major city on the planet. So they all wanted him dead or working exclusively for them. Her chrome skull tilted slightly. He chose dead rather than be owned. Then why are you telling me this? Because you actually give a shit. The woman's companions shifted slightly, combat-ready stances that suggested they were scanning the area for threats. Most corpo engineers just want the paycheck and the prestige. But you've been losing sleep over those dead workers. I can see it in your face. The stim's wearing off too fast. The neural fatigue. You're killing yourself trying to understand something that killed the man who created it. Marcus didn't deny it. She was right. He'd been running on stimulants and guilt for 8 months, watching buildings collapse and knowing he was somehow responsible. If Cross's methodology was so dangerous, Marcus said, why are his original structures still standing? Because he built them in the right places, following the natural flow patterns. But the corpos have been trying to replicate his designs without understanding his process. They're building towers in locations that look good on maps but ignore the underlying energy architecture, and every one of those buildings is a time bomb. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If she was right, then every megacity project currently under construction was potentially unstable. Not just Arasaka's. All of them. Militech, Petrochem, Sovoil, Biotechnica. Trillions of eurodollars being poured into structures that would eventually fail. I need proof, he said. Data. Something I can take to Arasaka that'll make them stop construction before more people die. The woman laughed, a synthetic sound that echoed off the alley walls. You think Arasaka will stop because people might die? They're planning for a war that'll kill millions. A few thousand workers are acceptable losses. And what do you want from me? I want you to finish what Cross started, the right way. She pulled a data shard from her jacket, its surface etched with patterns that looked almost organic. This contains Cross's real research. The notes he kept hidden from the corpos, his mapping of Night City's energy architecture, the actual methodology for building structures that work with the flow instead of against it. Marcus stared at the shard, barely daring to believe it was real. How did you get this? Cross gave it to me the day before he died. Told me to find someone who'd use it to build instead of destroy. I've been watching you for 3 months, Webb. You're that someone. She tossed the shard and Marcus caught it reflexively. The data storage felt warm in his palm, or maybe that was just his imagination. There's a catch, the woman continued. The moment you access that data, every major corporation will know you have it. Cross built in a dead man's switch. The file can't be opened without sending a broadcast to multiple networks. He wanted to make sure the knowledge couldn't be buried or monopolized. That'll make me a target. You're already a target. The only question is whether you die having changed nothing, or die having given humanity a chance to build a sustainable future. She turned to leave, her companions falling into formation around her. 46 hours, engineer. That's how long until Hayama pulls the plug on your investigation. I'd suggest you spend them wisely. They disappeared into the darkness as smoothly as they'd appeared, leaving Marcus alone in the alley where a genius had died for knowing too much. He looked down at the data shard, its surface catching the neon light in fractal patterns. If he accessed this, he'd be burning bridges with Arasaka, possibly every major corporation. But he'd also have the knowledge to prevent more collapses, more deaths, more buildings that sang terrible songs before they fell. Marcus slotted the shard into his neural port. The data hit his consciousness like a neural spike, overwhelming his optics with layers of information that threatened to fry his visual cortex. He dropped to his knees as the files unpacked themselves, terabytes of research flooding his neural buffer faster than his brain could process. But underneath the chaos, there was structure. Beautiful, terrible structure. Cross's research revealed a city Marcus had never seen before. Night City wasn't just concrete and chrome. It was a living network of energy flows, electromagnetic patterns, structural stress distribution, human movement algorithms, all interconnecting in a vast web of cause and effect. Every building affected every other building. Every power cable influenced the stability of structures blocks away. Every street redirected forces that rippled through the entire urban ecosystem. And Cross's designs didn't fight those forces. They rode them like surfers on waves, using the city's own energy to support structures that should have been impossible. The Arasaka Tower blueprint that Marcus had been following was a corrupted version of Cross's original design. Someone, probably a corporate architect trying to improve the plans, had moved structural elements, changed load distributions, adjusted the tower's orientation by 15 degrees. Small changes that seemed insignificant but had catastrophic effects because they broke the structure's relationship with the underlying energy patterns. Marcus could see it now, laid out in Cross's meticulous notes. The tower should have been positioned 40 meters northeast of its current location. The support structure should have aligned with the EM field patterns created by the surrounding power grid. The construction materials should have been arranged in a specific sequence that took advantage of the resonance frequencies generated by nearby buildings. Build it right, and it would stand forever. Build it wrong, and it would collapse under its own weight, just like it had, taking 217 lives with it. Marcus's optics flickered with incoming alerts. Multiple networks detecting the data breach just like the woman had warned. His neural signature was being flagged across corporate databases as he accessed files that weren't supposed to exist. He had maybe 10 minutes before Arasaka security showed up. Maybe 20 before Militech sent their own retrieval team. After that, he'd be lucky to survive the competing extraction attempts. But he had the knowledge now. Cross's complete methodology, his mapping of Night City's energy architecture, his designs for structures that worked with the city instead of against it. Enough information to revolutionize urban development, or to make Marcus the most wanted man in Night City. His comm pinged with an incoming call. Hayama, naturally. Webb, my security systems just flagged your neural signature accessing restricted data. Explain yourself. Marcus stood up, his legs shaky from the neural overload. I found Cross's real research, his actual methodology, everything we need to build stable megastructures. And you accessed it without authorization, triggering alerts across every major corporate network. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Saved thousands of lives, hopefully. The silence on the other end was heavy with implications. Marcus could almost hear Hayama running probability assessments, weighing the value of the knowledge against the complications it would create. Return to Arasaka Tower immediately, Hayama finally said. Bring the data. We'll analyze it, determine its validity, and proceed according to corporate protocol. No. Another pause. Longer this time. More dangerous. Repeat that, Webb. I want to be sure I heard correctly. Cross's research doesn't belong to Arasaka, or Militech, or any single corporation. It belongs to humanity because, without it, every megacity currently under construction is going to collapse. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. Marcus started walking toward the alley's exit, his optics tracking multiple vehicle signatures converging on his position. I'm releasing the data publicly. Every network, every database I can reach. Let the corporations fight over who gets to build with it, but the knowledge itself needs to be free. That's corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property, and about 40 other charges that'll put you in prison for the rest of your life. If you're lucky, probably, but at least future buildings won't kill their occupants. Marcus emerged onto the main street, where neon signs advertised synthetic pleasures and discount cyberware. His AV was parked 3 blocks north, but corporate security would have already flagged it. He needed a different exit strategy. A taxi, one of the old wheeled ones that still ran in Japantown, pulled up beside him. The window rolled down to reveal the chrome-skulled woman from the alley. Need a ride, engineer? Marcus didn't hesitate. He climbed in, and the taxi accelerated smoothly into Night City's traffic patterns. Where to? She asked. Somewhere with a hardline connection to the net. Strong enough to broadcast to multiple networks simultaneously, and defensible because we're going to have company. She grinned, or at least her chrome skull's mouth approximation moved in what might have been a smile. I know just the place. Beady Madhav. The taxi wove through Japantown streets, taking routes that Marcus's optics couldn't quite follow. Behind them, multiple vehicles were attempting pursuit. Arasaka security based on their signatures, possibly Militech as well. But the woman drove like someone who'd spent her life evading corporate extraction teams, and gradually the pursuit fell behind. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to what looked like an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. But Marcus's optics detected activity inside. Power signatures, network traffic, heat blooms from multiple servers. Netrunner Collective, the woman explained as they entered. Independent operators who don't work for any corp. They'll help you broadcast Cross's data in exchange for access to it. Fair trade. The interior was a maze of server racks and cable nests, with a dozen netrunners jacked into consoles that glowed with holographic displays. The air smelled like ozone and synth coffee, that peculiar combination of overheated electronics and human desperation. A man with more chrome than flesh looked up from his console. You're the engineer with Cross's files. We've been monitoring the corporate chatter. Half of Night City's security forces are looking for you. Can you broadcast it? Marcus asked. All of it? To every network simultaneously? We can. But you understand what this means, right? The moment this data goes public, you're enemy number one to every megacorp on the planet. Arasaka will disavow you. Militech will want you dead. Petrochem, Sovoil, Biotechnica. They'll all send teams. Your life expectancy drops to hours, maybe days. Marcus thought about the tower collapse. The bodies being loaded into transport vehicles. The families receiving automated condolence messages. The future collapses that would happen if Cross's knowledge stayed buried. Do it, he said. The Netrunner's chrome fingers flew across his console, establishing connections faster than Marcus could track. This is going to take about 15 minutes to propagate fully. I'd suggest you find somewhere comfortable to wait for the end of the world. Marcus sat down on a salvaged office chair, feeling the weight of the last 48 hours settling into his bones. The stimulants were wearing off, leaving him hollow and shaking. But he'd done it. Finished what Cross started. Given humanity the knowledge to build cities that wouldn't collapse under their own weight. Whether anyone would actually use that knowledge. Whether the corporations would let it spread. Whether he'd survive long enough to see the results. Those were questions for a future he probably wouldn't live to see. The chrome-skulled woman sat down beside him, pulling out a flask of something that smelled like synthetic whiskey. To Cross, she said, taking a drink before offering it to Marcus. The crazy bastard who tried to save the world. Marcus accepted the flask, the burn of alcohol cutting through his neural fatigue. What was your name? He asked. Cross's friend. Who are you? Reina Vasquez. I was his research assistant before the Corpos decided his work was too dangerous to share. She took the flask back. I've been waiting 3 years to finish what he started. Thanks for being crazy enough to help. The Netrunner called out from his console. Data upload at 70%. Corporate response teams converging on multiple potential locations, but they haven't found us yet. Estimate 5 minutes until full propagation. Marcus pulled up the data in his hood one more time, looking at Cross's maps of Night City's energy architecture. The patterns were beautiful, organic, almost alive. This was how cities should be built. Not as monuments to corporate power, but as extensions of the natural flows that already existed in the space. Maybe some of the megacorps would see that. Maybe they'd use Cross's methodology to build stable structures instead of death traps. Or maybe they'd keep doing what they'd always done, prioritizing profit over safety, and Marcus's sacrifice would be meaningless. Either way, the knowledge was out there now, available to anyone who wanted to use it. Upload complete, the Netrunner announced. Cross's research is now public domain, distributed across 43 networks and counting. Every architect, engineer, and urban planner on the planet has access to it. He unplugged from his console, his expression unreadable behind his chrome optics. For what it's worth, engineer, you just changed the future. Whether that's for better or worse, we'll find out. Marcus stood up, his legs steadier now despite the exhaustion. Through the warehouse's grimy windows, he could see the Night City skyline, towers reaching toward the sky, each one a statement of corporate ambition and human ingenuity. Some of them would stand forever, built according to Cross's principles. Others would eventually collapse, victims of ignorance and greed. But now at least humanity had a choice. Build with the flow, or build against it and face the consequences. What will you do now? Reina asked. Arasaka will want your head. Militech too. Every corp in Night City. Marcus thought about that. About the life he'd had as a mid-level engineer, comfortable and safe. About the choice he'd made to chase a dead man's genius into dangerous territory. About the future he'd just created, where his name would be associated with either salvation or betrayal depending on who told the story. I'll disappear, he said. Change my identity. Get new chrome that masks my signatures. Become someone the corporations can't find. He looked at Reina. Unless you have a better idea. She grinned that chrome skull grin. I know people. Ripperdocs who can make you vanish. Netrunners who can scrub your digital footprint. You help us build the first real megastructure using Cross's methodology, somewhere outside corporate control, and we'll make sure you stay alive long enough to see it finished. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing in Night City, ever was. But it was a chance to keep building, to use what Cross had taught him, to create structures that would stand long after the corporate wars burned themselves out. Marcus extended his hand. Deal. They shook on it. Chrome meeting flesh. Old world meeting new, as outside the window, Night City continued its endless dance of light and shadow. Death and rebirth. Collapse and reconstruction. The man who built the world had died 3 years too early. But his vision would live on, carried forward by those crazy enough to believe that architecture could be more than just steel and concrete. It could be hope, built one impossible structure at a time.